How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Jack here with another reaction to the Purple Puppet. More requests have come my way to check out some more from Randy Feltface, especially from his full special on to write a novel. And naturally, I want to oblige. And more specifically was this segment about the story of Ernest Hemingway, because that was a punchline that he used at the end of his, at least the last video that I reacted to.
There is no Morgan. You know the other great thing about that story? First draft. Fuck you, Hemingway!
Now, I did laugh at that for a very good reason, because it's Ernest Miller Hemingway, and I quite quickly understood that this was a reference to likely the events of his life, right? Like if the story of the bookshelf is one that Randy made on the spot, right? First draft, then Hemingway could write like 500 novels about his life in the very first go by just citing of his life's events. He's a fascinating individual and a victim of circumstances of his life, his family, his time, but of course, he's a dick, okay? Like, don't get it twisted. There are individuals in this world that I consider to be absolute mad lads, and they come in a variety of flavors. There's one that I have cited a lot here on this channel, who is one that I love a lot. I actually saw a statue of his when I visited Hungary. Ernest Hemmignway, the savior of mothers, you know, a person that is dying of unfortunate circumstances while trying to do the best, to do good as much as possible. And then you have the chaotic evil, the likes of Mad Jack Churchill, who just wakes up one day and says that I don't want peace, I want problems always. And then somewhere there in the middle, there's Ernest Hemingway, right? The tortured souls that just suffered and are more like predestined to have a life that sucks, but do the best out of it. And that's literally how I like to classify him. But let's stop the commentary for now, as let's check what it is that Randy has to say about the man himself.
We're free! It's just for me, that bit. It's just for me. Okay. Okay, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. For the very first time, I would wager in all of your living memories, I now am proud to present to you the life and times of Ernest Miller Hemingway in approximately 3.5 minutes. Go! Born in Chicago in 1899, son of a physician and a musician, reasonably uneventful childhood, decided to study journalism. Enlisted with the Red Cross during World War I, got blown up in Milan and spent 6 months in hospital with severe shrapnel wounds in both legs. Fell in love with a nurse, they decided to get married. He came home to prepare, she stayed there and ditched him for an Italian soldier, which initiated a lifelong pattern of him rejecting women before they had a chance to reject him.
Yep, that's Hemingway for you. Went through 4 marriages and children. He was a very distant father. He more or less like perpetuated what happened in his childhood, projected it on to his kids. Was like, trauma, kids, here, let me dump it on ya.
Take note, Maddie. Got a job as a foreign correspondent, fell in love with his roommate's sister, married her and moved to Paris. They hung out with Gertrude Stein, they kicked it with Pablo Picasso. He started writing in earnest, no pun intended, moved to Toronto, had a kid, moved back to Paris, published a couple of books, cheated on his wife, got divorced, married the other woman, converted to Catholicism. Cut his head open after pulling on a cord thinking he was flushing a toilet and instead ripped a skylight from the roof and smashed it onto his face.
First and foremost, the gestures, the mannerism, so good. The puppeteering work is always on point, but the thing there with the skylight is very similar to the story that he told, right? With the bookshelf. And when he got the thing on his face and the cot. Wow, that's how we crafted that. Presumably, at least. Because this is before the bookshelf story.
Moved to Kansas City, had another kid, his dad committed suicide, he shot a lot of bears for some reason. Had a car accident, had another kid, went to Africa to kill some wild animals and got dysentery, karma. Published another book, moved to Cuba, shot himself in the leg whilst aiming at a shark.
Like I said, you don't need to make stuff up about this type of individual. He came from a different time. That's why they used to call him a man's man. I mean, everything came along with that, of course. The chauvinism, everything. He was an ass, okay? But still, he was such a fucking Chad. In a way, that's what's happened to a man when they have nothing to lose. I might expand on that a bit further.
Cheated on his wife, got divorced, married the other woman, published For Whom the Bell Tolls, sold 500,000 copies in a couple of months and got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Cheated on his wife, got divorced, married the other woman, became the self-appointed leader of a band of village militia outside of Paris, and was subsequently brought up on charges for contravening the Geneva Convention and got away with it like a fucking champion. Got pneumonia, moved back to Cuba, and spent most of his spare time on his boat, tracking Nazi U-boats with a machine gun and a pile of hand grenades. I am not making this shit up! Had a few more car accidents, 3 more concussions, got clawed while playing with a lion. Got depressed, drank, got fat, published a couple more books.
Okay, listen, I know that his listing of all the things right now sounds wild. They are all true, but saying that Ernest Hemingway got depressed is like the understatement of the century. Like, if this man's conversion to Catholicism meant that he now believes in such things as predestination, well, the writing on the wall for this man was spelling depression the entire time, ever since he was in his mom's womb. Because Ernest Hemingway came from a family that was destined to be a fuck-up, okay? His siblings, out of how many there were, 4 of them committed suicide. And the dad too, as was mentioned before. And Ernest's father was not a kind man either. He used to beat the shit out of his children. And did suffer from what by today's standard we will diagnose as bipolar disorder, but back then they did not really have that diagnosis, nor did they care. And so, beside the violence of course, he would be very absent from his children's life, leaving the mom to take care of things. But here's the thing, Ernest had a sort of love-hate relationship with his dad, because part of him did admire him. Yeah. Believe it or not, and it's weirder when I tell you about the ritual that the man used to have, Ernest that is. He used to camp in the family shed, wielding the family shotgun, aiming at his dad when he came home and pretended to shoot the man. But he loved him more than his mom. Why? This is where it gets unhinged. Ernest's mom had perhaps, I don't know, psychotic episodes. She did suffer from insomnia, as far as I remember. I read a little bit about the biography of the man, because when there are authors that are like him, that stand out so much, right? That makes Pablo Picasso that he hung out with's Blue Period look like an afternoon. You gotta read about the man. But his mom wanted him to be a girl. It was as such that Ernest's sister, his mom, constantly was dressing him up and cutting his hair so to look like her, pretending that they were twins. Yeah, she was out there and naturally, of course, also suffering from some mental disability. Yet still, she did praise her son's aptitude towards doing very manly things such as hunting, fishing, all of those activities. And she did actually love his writing, unlike his father, who absolutely hated everything that Ernest wrote. Dude literally called some of his best-selling novels piece of garbage. Yet still, he loved his dad more. It lets you know a little bit about how he was a victim of his circumstances, as I said before, because it was part of that time. Back when, very much like how the alpha male podcasters of today make masculinity be so fucking fragile, men did not go and get themselves diagnosed for the physical illnesses, lest it was literally about a limb that would fall apart, and even less so, of course, if it was something mental. So, being degraded to the point of having to be feminine was, of course, not something that was look great on. But yeah, the depression and mental illnesses that were chronic throughout the entire family was passed on to him. They all had like a cycle of depression, chronic, that was going down the family. And it was only very late when it came to Ernest's life that he was actually diagnosed for something. And guess for a second what type of treatment they tried to give him for that. Electroshock therapy. The fact that this man made it so far in life, became a best-selling author, achieved all of the things that he did, went through 2 world wars, and managed to not just survive the constant desire of taking his own life and surviving electroshock therapy is insane to me. And all of that ability to push through was robbed away from him because nobody truly acknowledged the suffering and the pain that he had. He knew, he wrote about it, he sent it to his friends, to his publishers. In his books, the protagonists were always men that took their own lives, in the beginning at least, and he's a special case. Perhaps right now you might not be smiling so much because this was supposed to be a comedy special. But just to keep it in mind that the man that we are talking about right now is a fucking legend. As I said, in character, not a good person. He did not treat his kids well because the cycle continued from his part. But still, what a man.
Went back to Africa to shoot some more wild animals and barely survived 2 separate plane crashes in the space of 24 hours, winding up with a fractured skull, internal bleeding, cracked spine, ruptured liver, first-degree burns, and a paralysed sphincter muscle. Come on! Won a Nobel Prize, had a file opened on him by J. Edgar Hoover, left a bunch of shit in a safe in Cuba and moved to Idaho, paranoid that the feds were following him, which they were. Because he spent most of the 1940s working for the KGB.
Yeah, they thought that, he was too pro-communist, that's true.
Again, not making this shit up. Suffered from hepatitis, nephritis, hypertension, hemochromatosis, anemia, and impotence. Got committed, received way too much electroconvulsive therapy and came out all fucked up, started hinting at suicide, so immediately got recommitted, received another couple of months' worth of electroconvulsive therapy, got released, put both barrels of his favourite 12-gauge shotgun into his mouth, and blew his fucking head off. What a guy! That is all true. What a fucking unit! Hemingway is the quintessential anti-hero, the talented, charismatic, belligerent, suicidal, alcoholic genius that can't keep his dick in his trousers. And he still found time to write about 15 books.
Yeah.
I've written 1, and it took me ages because I procrastinate like a motherfucker. I only got this written by doing most of the work in my local public library.
Well, when it comes to Hemingway, believe it or not, one of the things that actually made him be so good at writing was that he feared his quick passing. The depression somehow boosted certain attributes of his. Like the Sun Also Rises book. He wrote it in 8 weeks. Who does that? He's the type of person that will give you a recounting of one of the most insane piece of psychological literature, and then you ask him who wrote it, and he's like, "That's just my life, dude." It's it's insane, man. Like I said, Hemingway's a fucking unit.
Because it's very difficult to masturbate in the reference section without getting caught. It's almost impossible, in fact.
This is not how I imagined this set to end. What the fuck? Listen, Ernest Hemingway had enough testosterone in him to transition someone. Dude is a mad lad. Like, there are very few individuals whose stories goes to that extent. Like, I would always give like a recommendation for those of you who might care to watch or listen to more of this type of story. Naturally, you will always encounter war heroes, right? Hemingway was an ambulance driver during the First World War. Yet still, with the I mentioned Mad Jack Churchill, right? Again, war hero. Go watch The Fat Electrician. There are plenty of those out there. I know that some might be writing, when are you going to react to The Fat Electrician next? I will eventually, okay? I just have not had time, because when I encounter his videos, people tend to get mad at me because I end up ranting for far too long, because I tend to pick the ones where I know a little bit, because it makes for fun commentary on my part. It's not just me just staring poggers. It can be fun sometimes, okay? I won't deny that. But in the case of Hemingway, it's a tragic tale, but one you can't help but feel like enamored by, because all the stuff that he went through is insane. And it's even crazier because there are references to him in different works. I think in the Remedy games, yes, you know, Sam Lake, who writes for the most part for the different Remedy games, there are the depictions of the character of Alex Casey, who is the cop in Alan Wake, as well as Max Payne, tend to have references to Hemingway, at least comparisons to him. Max Payne, for most of you will know through his depiction in Max Payne 3, raging alcoholic, suffering for far too much, right? Going through all the pains in the world, deals with painkillers and attempts to take his life at some point, but still carries on. And the same thing with Alex Casey, the cop that is chasing against, at least trying to figure out the whole things with mental struggle and the darkness that surrounds him. And an even better reference is from Cyberpunk 2077 with the character of Morgan Blackhand. You will know that in Cyberpunk 2077 there are such characters that are called Night City Legends, right? There is obviously Johnny Silverhand, the equivalence of what if the Saudi guys who caused 9/11 was an American dude who looked like Keanu Reeves and was a rock star. Yeah, essentially that's what it is. You have Adam Smasher, who killed the world's favorite lolly.
Come in here! Lockdown!
You have Rogue, who's running the Afterlife, and Rage, right? The hacker who broke the black wall. I know, I'm getting on a bit of a tangent here, but amongst all of those, one of the most mysterious and the most badass of them all that was barely enhanced is Morgan Blackhand, who just took on the corpos on his own. A freaking mad lad, and he is always stated to be lesser than Hemingway. So, just goes to show how much of a legend Hemingway is, even in the world of fantasy and sci-fi. He gets heightened up to the high heavens. That being said, this was a fun video just to reminisce about and to talk a little bit about Hemingway, because what a man. If you liked it, naturally, don't forget to hit the like button. Wish you all to have a wonderful day. See you guys in the next one. Bye.